Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and I am streaming live from the Team Needham Abode podcast studio and is super excited today to have Lara Heimann on our show. She's going to be talking about the LYT yoga method, and I hope you're as excited as I am to learn more about this. So, Lara, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up being on my podcast.
Well, I also have been in wellness and fitness for a long time. I am a physical therapist and yoga teacher for over 30 years. And I went back and got my postgraduate certification in neurodevelopmental treatment, which is really about neuroplasticity and applying that into a clinical setting. That's what I was doing originally, working with brain injured patients, stroke patients, anyone who had a neurological injury, and applying these techniques to help them rewire where they had lost motor function. And at the same time, I was teaching a kind of classical vinyasa type style. And eventually I started blending the two of those for several reasons, but really mainly because I realized like the yoga practice was wonderful, but it sometimes would reinforce suboptimal movement habits that people were carrying around in their modern day lifestyle. You know, you sit at a desk for 8 hours and then you get in your car and then you go to yoga class and you're coming in there with some already existing posture and movement patterns, right? That yoga, it feels great no matter what. Like to move, it always feels great. But I wanted to kind of take it a step beyond that and use the mat as an opportunity to rewire movement patterns that we could then take into our lives. So I applied these principles that I was doing with my stroke patients of getting on the ground and doing developmental moves, which are essentially the moves we do when we grow our brain through movement from being in utero, coming out as a floppy baby, and then eventually becoming bipedal. And we have to develop these strong proximal postural muscles, which are the muscles close to the bones to support our spine, our axis, our pelvis. And over time, when we're not exploring like we did as kids, we lose some of our movement experience. And we also kind of dial down the activity in those deeper core muscles that are so important for energy efficiency, keeping us injury free, and just helping us move with more joy. So I created this LYT yoga method. LYT stands for Lara's yoga technique, but really it's really about feeling lit up in your body, your movement, in your spirit, because everybody wants more energy, wants more zest and vitality. And so it's just a blend of, neuroscience, yoga, and physical therapy. And it's really wonderful for everybody.
Wow, what a great introduction and a great description. So when you say posture, it reminds me, I forgot. Yeah.
Right.
We're so used to doing this. And then it's like we wonder why our shoulders are always sore. We're at a desk like this. And it's just, it is a reminder. I've got a friend that he taught me how to barefoot water ski out of Florida. And one of the things he talks about in body position is, he says, shoulders back, roll your shoulders back when you're up on the skis. He says, just do it all the time when you're walking around. Just remember, it's just a good posture to be in. It's like, so I think of him when
when people think of posture, they kind of think of like military stance, like this rigidity, and it's really the carriage of your energy. And posture is, to your friend's point, it makes you more efficient. It just means that you're in a position where your bones are stacked, two bones coming together as a joint. The bones are stacked in a way that share the most surface area. And any structure that shares the most surface area is well balanced, and it's really efficient, and it's stronger. So it's not just posture looks better, it's really better for our musculoskeletal system, but also our respiratory system. It affects our breathing. It affects our neurology. There's so much along the axis of the spine that corresponds to our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So really how we stand, move, and hold our energy affects our mental state as well.
Well, and just like you just said it with the surface area, it's stability. It's basic physics. I mean, how do you posture basic physics?
Exactly. That's what I teach.
And being leaned over like this is never going to be good for for anything besides being out of balance.
Yeah. If you want to feel
getting weaker.
tired.
Yeah, right.
Because you're like collapsing with gravity. So it's like you
For
said,
sure.
physics. And that's what I really, that's the other thing that I felt was missing in not just yoga practice, but in some movement practices in general. If the educator is not bringing in the elements of biomechanics and physics, because that's really how we move efficiently. And efficiently just means that we're holding on to more of our energy. We're capitalizing and enhancing it versus kind of leaking it or losing it because we're collapsing that structure. And so it's so powerful. And I think that what I try and do, and I think the LYT method does this so well because everyone is trained by me, it's that we're just pulling back the curtains. Everyone deserves to understand this. You don't have to be a physical therapist. Most of us were not taught anything like this in school. We weren't taught about our body, what a scapula is, why neutral spine is important, how to hinge at the hips versus, tilting the pelvis. These are, again, principles of physics, and they're not, it's you don't have to be a physical therapist to understand them. So we really teach people about their bodies, how to feel more at home in their bodies.
I tell you, you're making so many things go on in my brain. As an endurance athlete, I have a coach, a mountain bike racer. I'm a mountain bike racer, cross country mountain bike racer, and there are 4 or 5 items he says on every one of my endurance rides, my longer endurance, low intensity rides. Focus on neutral spine, hinge at the hips. He says that.
I love it. He's
yeah,
exactly right.
and just like so. One of the things I do in my life is I realize anytime those principles, they cross over to everything.
Everything, yes.
Just like my friend Lane Bowers at the time had a barefoot water ski. Roll your shoulders back, big chest. He calls it a big chest, roll your shoulders back. That's just good in general. And same thing with like what my coach teaches me, hinge at the hips, neutral spine. Those are basic principles.
They're basic principles.
I'm sure there's something with yoga, like engage the core. Is that coming in somewhere?
Exactly. And, so that phrase means kind of elicits different ideas for people. So I try and be a little bit more specific with it. And it's kind of, so it's like, if you elongate your spine, hinge at your hips, hold that spine stable. Well, just by cueing that, that's going to summon the activity of those core muscles.
Right.
And so it's really cool. The core is everything but your limbs. So it's your shoulder complex, your rib cage, your pelvis, underneath, inside, all around. And so the core is the conduit of energy. And it's like an insulated cord. You want good insulation. If I plug in my charger to the wall, I don't want a frayed cord to bring that charge into my computer. And so we want our conductor to be really powerful and efficient. And that's what like engaging the core is. It's like holding your center against the different challenges. So like with yoga, if people are just moving and mimicking movement, they're going to just do it in whatever way their body is telling them. So what we want to do is teach them how to stabilize the core with that movement, not just fold forward and collapse. Gravity is going to do that for you. And so it's really, again, just bringing inquiry and curiosity into the practice so that just, again, you bring that into your life, and that's going to keep you healthier. You're going to have more energy. And, that's, to me, the practice of yoga is really practicing attention. And we need that so much. I mean, we are in a modern day life that is very sedentary and is also very distractible. And so practicing that attention, how it feels to sit right now, there's this kind of unconscious awareness that will naturally start to become part of your daily life when you practice that attention, that you're going to even be able to be aware of how you're moving while you're doing other things.
Absolutely. And, one thing you've mentioned over and over again is movement. And that's what's so important. And that's something we don't do in our sedentary lives.
Yeah.
And and you mentioned how, when you look at toddlers that start, walking and then running and, running around. And as kids, we move constantly. And you can see it in a lot of adults. I mean, I'm sure you've seen as a physical therapist and as a yoga instructor that once you stop moving, then things start going downhill. And the important thing is when you do move, that you increase your balance, you increase your strength, you increase your mobility. And those are things that we have to do to stay alive.
Yes.
So, movement is just so important, and it doesn't have to stop. We see usually in my experience, what I've seen, and unfortunately, Laura, and you can comment on this, it used to be that, we didn't start going downhill until after we graduated from high school, because we were still doing things and playing basketball and PE, playing sports with our friends. And then we went separate ways and we stopped doing those things and it just went downhill. But we didn't have to. It was just a choice. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing, all kinds of problems where, younger individuals can't move appropriately. And I think it's just due to just not moving enough. I mean, that's one of the problems.
I mean, that's technology is amazing. It's allowing us to have this conversation. It connects you with people all around the world. It gives us so much information. And yet it has to be, I think in the younger kids, the main problem with technology is that it is sedentary. Most of it is summoning them to sit and watch something. It's passive. And those earlier years when you and I were growing up and we didn't have that, and we also didn't have probably parents who were, watching our every move. We were outside playing. We were,
Right.
there was a lot of adventure. That play is so important. It's so important for our bodies, but it's as important for our brains. So movement is not only good for all the reasons you said, for the strength of our body, for our balance, for our proprioception, for our coordination, for our breathing, but it's really important for our brain. Our brain craves novelty. That neuroplasticity that I spoke of. If you're doing the same thing every day, and then especially if you're not moving a lot in variable ways, like there are people I was seeing, 10 years ago. I'm now 55. I was seeing people when I was in my 40s who were my age currently, who were not getting on the ground very much because they're like, oh, very stiff. They couldn't get on the ground. They didn't have a reason necessarily to get on the ground. So when I had them get on the ground, I would just observe them. And there was such a discoordination in it, a discomfort. Yeah. That is something that is so important. I mean, it takes your joints through full range of motion. It's important for, safety, like you need, but it's really crucial to be able to take your body through all the ways it was engineered to move. And that is the biggest thing that happens, like you said, from younger people, it's getting younger and younger, is their movement experience is getting closed off. They're not going on the playground and discovering all the different ways, crawling, hanging, swinging, running, sprinting, jumping down. These are ways that really stimulate our body, but also our brain. So it's a two-way street. We have to, as we get older, we actually have to move more, and we have to move very purposefully in all the ranges and all the planes we're designed to do.
Right. I saw, Laura, I got to share this. I saw one of the saddest things last week. I was driving home and I went by a high school and there were kids out there running. And there were probably 20 kids, and only 2 of them could run. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. And they were probably running. They probably ran out a quarter mile and came back. One of them had to stop and throw up. I couldn't believe it. And I remember, 30, 40 years ago when I was in high school, elementary or junior high school. Everybody could run. There was usually one kid in the class that couldn't, out of 30 or 40. But now it seems like it's 90% of the kids that can't run. And it's because they don't move enough. That's the problem. Once you stop moving, then, it's going to get harder and harder.
It's physics. It's Newton's law. Things at rest want to stay at rest. And it's really, So it's
And just like you were saying, and I am surprised, of course, you've seen this. I didn't even, I couldn't believe it until I heard about it. And it was a common, it wasn't a super sick person. She was a middle-aged woman, probably a typical middle-aged woman in America. And she couldn't, you were talking about one of the things she started doing when she started getting into her health journey was they had her just get up off the floor, lay on her belly and get up off the floor. She had a difficult time doing that.
yeah.
You mentioned about safety. I mean, imagine being 40, 50 years old and you fall down and you can't get up.
Exactly. I mean, it's like,
That's a big problem.
it's a huge problem. And we used to think of like falling down in, very elder years, but it can happen to anybody. The other thing is if you practice all the time, I mean, it should be daily, multiple times a day. You're getting down, you're getting up. And that's, again, what we practice on our mat is so many, we go through all the different planes and a lot of getting down and up in various ways. But if you practice that, you also have more of a response when you do lose your balance, when you do trip. If you're going on a hike, you're going to trip over a root most likely. And you want your body, you want your nervous system already primed to be able to respond to that perturbation. But if you aren't doing that on a regular basis, the actual fall itself is going to be much more drastic. So it goes both ways. You want to be able to get up, but you also want to potentially even avoid falling all the way down because you have more of a response to that loss of imbalance.
That's proprioception, correct?
Yes, it's proprioception, it's coordination too. So there's always multiple things going on in the brain, that the ability for the signal to come quick enough to the muscles so they respond. And that is a coordination effort in the neural firing. And so people will practice with me, and sometimes they'll go into my platform and they're like, oh, these classes are too fast. We have classes of all levels, by the way, but they might have picked one. And I always say, I don't move fast, but I move with coordination. And that might feel fast to you. And so just slow, like the great thing about technology here, you can slow it down, but you need to be able to, don't avoid those classes just because they're challenging. In fact, another thing I really want to point out is challenge is the only thing that grows us. We have to challenge ourselves. We know that to be true. Like we know that when we go through hard times and we recover from it, there's a resilience that is wired in. And our bodies are resilient, our spirits are resilient, but we also have to practice that and really, like, again, magnify it so that we grow, and challenge is what grows us. So don't avoid something. Just think, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to practice the elements. And that, again, is that coordination, that you're getting responsiveness to the muscles quicker so that you can move with more agility. So agility is also a big part of that motor coordination and proprioception.
Well, and when you look at this, when you think about what you're discussing in top athletes, whether they're a mountain bike racer that does flips on their mountain bike, or they're a professional basketball player that does a dunk, they're not doing it fast. It looks beautiful because they've done it so many times. They're so coordinated. It's just muscle memory, and they're just going through the motions. It doesn't seem fast to them because they practice it so much. And they started slow though, right?
Yeah, exactly. They broke down the elements. So that's what I always do too, is I break down the foundations of movements and biomechanics slowly so you can really experience and start to kind of hardwire it. And, to your point, like, think of, like, you're a mountain bike racer, like that, the responsiveness you're getting is proprioception, it's coordination. And that is one of the core's biggest job. When we talk about our core, is responsiveness, to manage quick changes so that you could bring it out into the limbs there. So you can make those small adjustments with your hands, make those small adjustments with your weight shifting. That is all the responsiveness of the core too. And that's why core stability, it's not rigid, it's dynamic. It's so essential for all movement, and especially in top athletes and in competitions like you're doing.
So, when I first started learning about yoga 10 years ago or so, or 10 plus years ago, I mean, I'd heard about, when I started, I should repeat, let me quantify that. When I first started doing yoga 10 plus years ago, you know, when I'd heard about it for many, many years, I always thought it was something more where, you know, just easy going, you're just stretching your body, you know, it's not very intense. You're not gonna, you know, and then I learned more about it, but I want your comments about it, because I think sometimes the perception of yoga is, oh, you know, I want to get strong in the gym. I want to do resistance training. Yoga is not going to be good for me. I want to get strong on my bike. I want to get fast on my bike. Yoga is going to be a waste of time. It's just in there stretching my muscles. So comment on that.
Yeah, I get that a lot, because obviously people that are drawn to yoga, I think originally people that are really drawn to yoga have a natural propensity for kind of flexibility and ease of, you know, their range of motion is pretty good. So they feel somewhat successful in it. And those that are not as naturally flexible either struggle with it, think it's not going to be good for them, or think, like you said, maybe it's a waste of time. How is this going to actually help what I'm doing, because it's not really making me stronger. I think of it as like, if you move through your ranges of motion, not to the in range. That was the other thing that I've changed. You know, when I created my own style, I was like, there's no point in admiring and adoring and like applauding this in range of motion that a lot of this yoga practice tended to do, and was very intimidating and not accessible for people. But instead, it's taking your body through ranges of motion and being able to have control in those range of motion. So that's where the strength and stability, combined with the mobility, I think that's why yoga is so great for athletes, because athletes have their own imbalances. You know, I've worked with professional athletes. I've worked with the Olympic rowers, for instance, for many years.
Mm-hmm.
They are really strong, and they're
Yes.
also really imbalanced. So what worked well is creating less of that imbalance, balancing them more in the ways that would actually help them prevent injuries. They would have repetitive injuries, like in the rib cage, for instance. They would fracture ribs. How do you fracture a rib from rowing? Well, the force produced by bringing that oar into the water and over again, they have strong legs, they have strong lats. They're, you know, but their deeper proximal muscles were not as strong as those mover muscles. So we have to balance that, because those moving muscles, which are the kind of outer layer muscles, the show muscles, so to speak, if they are too strong versus the proximal muscles too weak, that imbalance will eventually
Injury.
become an injury.
Yeah.
So that's where I think yoga is so wonderful from an athletic perspective, is it really is working on balancing all the different muscle performance within the fuller range too, because sometimes you don't go into the bigger ranges in certain movement. Runners, for instance, you know, there's a lot of imbalance in runners. A lot of times their glutes aren't very strong. They can do a lot with their hamstrings and calves, but the glutes are powerful. They really could be effective. So just creating more balance is essential. And I think that's where yoga comes in beautifully.
Well, and when you mentioned range of motion, I, I try I try to think of everyday things in our lives and functionality. Um,
Yes. Yes.
you know, because let's face it, in my opinion, I mean, one of the reasons not only do I enjoy mountain bike racing, but one of the reasons that I do gym work, I try to get fast on my mountain bike, because really overall it makes me a healthier human. Um, I'm not going to make money mountain bike racing. I'm not going to make a living doing it. So I just want to be healthy doing it and make me overall healthy and more of a functional human. So, and I believe that as humans, we should be strong and fast. I believe that's how we're designed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some of the functional movements, some of the movements we do in the gym every day. Here's a perfect example. I had somebody message me the other day, and she got hurt bench pressing. And a bench press is one of the least functional movements we ever do. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but to go all the way down in a bench press just so you can brag about how much you bench. And I get it. If you're competing, you've got no choice but to do that, to make it a legal lift. But it's not good for you, in my opinion. Can you comment on that as a physical therapist and a yoga instructor?
I totally agree. I mean, I'm always, and I'll, you know, I did I did a little Instagram thing and it got a lot of comments, and I wrote a blog about it, and it was called, I thought the reverse lunge was pretty dumb. And I'm talking about the reverse lunge where you're upright and you step a leg back, holding weight, and then come back. And I'm like, you need to hinge at the hips. There's like, if you look at the functionality, we're never stepping back with one foot and picking something up off the ground.
When would you ever do? You would never do that.
You never do it, right? And so it's like, there's so many other ways of training your quads and then getting your glutes involved always, that would be way, way more impactful in daily life. And, preventing it, I think a lot of people can get injured in that because they're loading that back patella in a way that, the back heels off the floor, all the way, your weight is not centered over your pelvis. It's problematic. So, but most importantly, it's not functional. So I always say, like, okay, push-ups. Do we do push-ups as a functional thing? Maybe, like some form of them, getting to the ground, looking under the floor, yeah, that to me, like, way better than a bench press. I totally agree. It's like you're loading your shoulder in a way that it's not like you're taking it through a full range and then loading it. And by the way, big chests are not very functional. They really
aren't. I got to argue with you. I mean, I'm gonna agree with you on that.
Yeah,
I've said this on this podcast, and the powerlifters and bodybuilders think I'm just crazy. But honestly, Laura, pectoral muscles were never a thing on humans, at least not well developed, until we started weight training. And you train them specifically because you're right. They're not a functional big muscle. I mean, yeah, sure, we need to do some of this and some of this, but they're not. Yeah, right. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
The problem is they create a really bigger imbalance that people already have around the shoulders, because everything we do is forward in daily life. Most people, when they say, what do you think I should do at the gym? I'm like, if you have whatever, a limited amount of time, work on your back, work on the back of your shoulders, work on your scapula muscles, work on the muscles that are supporting the axis of the spine. When you are working on your chest, you're taking your shoulder, you're creating more tension to go forward, which we're already doing in daily life. And then you wonder why we have shoulder issues. It's because there's such an imbalance around the shoulder joint itself. So yes, I'm always looking, if somebody loves something, they're like, yeah, but this just gives me such a high. I'm like, I'm not going to take it away from you, but you better, as twice as much work on your back, because you've got to balance that out.
I will tell you, being a former power lifter, bench presser, I had lots of issues with my back, partly because of the posture that we do every day, but also my massage therapist says that my pec muscles were well developed and they were pulling my shoulders forward. So the best thing that she would do would actually massage my pec and stretch my pec out. And I learned to do that too. It's just a reminder that we need to be balanced. And a lot of times what we do in the gym, you mentioned it, you said, what do you call the outer muscles? The show muscles?
The show muscles. Yeah.
Right.
The big mover muscles are show muscles.
And that's what people like to show off, but that's not necessarily overall the healthiest thing. You need a healthy body, functional body in general.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, to me, what I find most physically attractive, I think it's because I'm automatically realizing, like, this person has like fluidity, it's not the big bulk. It's just a lot of tone, but very balanced. And then that, ability to move gracefully with that tone. Like, look at male dancers, for example. Like, they're very ripped, but it's very balanced, because they're doing so much work, they're lifting, but they have such beautiful back muscles, leg muscles, all of it. They're gorgeous. Yeah.
One of the examples I like to use, I think, are some of the fittest males around are gymnasts.
Oh, gymnasts, rock climbers.
Yeah, they're strong. They're lean. They're not too big because they can't be to move like they do. And they can really move. I mean, and I think as humans, that's how we were designed to be. So, and I'm an endurance athlete myself, but I know I come somewhere in the middle, because I know I could be faster if I lost some muscle mass, especially upper body muscle mass, but I'm not willing to sacrifice that. I want to be a balanced human. I mean, athlete in general, but I think as humans, we're designed to be athletes. We're designed to be strong and fast. So that means that we need to have good heart, good lungs, and have good lean body mass, good VO2 max,
Absolutely.
all that
All the
stuff.
above, all the above.
Yeah.
And that's
So,
what, yeah,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was
No,
just
you
going
go
to
ahead.
say, blend of the yoga practice, like what I really eventually saw between my, clinical work and teaching yoga is there was a bridge. I could bridge this gap that I saw in both, that we could bring more of the mindful, like science and spirit together in a way that was really impactful for teaching people how to move better and feel better for not just, next year, but for decades to come.
Exactly. That's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Um, so do you, when you start something on a yoga program, do you recommend they do any other stuff, or is it just yoga? Do you recommend they do gym work with resistance training, any cardio stuff? What do you recommend that?
I mean, if someone were to come to me and say, "What's the ideal plan?" I would absolutely say, "Of course, you need to get some cardio in." So for me, I practice this style 5 or 6 days a week, and then in addition to that, I used to run. I don't run anymore, mainly because I just don't like the way it makes my body feel. But I hike, and I hike with like a rucksack, for instance, because I think that weight bearing for menopausal, I'm a menopausal woman, but anyone like my husband does the rucksack as well. It's really nice because you're adding load, you're getting your heart rate up. It's very functional as well. But whatever you do, like it just again, like what you were saying, complement it, have some cardiovascular, have some mobility, yoga type work. And then strength training is really important. There's no doubt about it. And the research is continuing to, show us what we already know. But that doesn't have to be go to the gym. Like I have a kettlebell. I do work with
Hmm.
that. Again, it's really functional. I try and
Yep.
combine all the functional movement with just some added load. I've created classes on our platform with weights. So adding weights with yoga movements is like people love these classes because it gets your heart rate up. I mean, it feels like your whole body is getting flushed out and worked out in this most amazing way. So yeah, I would say I always tell people like whatever you enjoy, let's capitalize on that because then you're going to be more likely to do it. So if you didn't enjoy running, Shawn, like you enjoy biking, I'm going to like, let's talk about biking. I'm not going to make you go run. Like, so what I
Right.
do is I try and ask people what they enjoy. If they enjoy walking, I'm like, great, walk a lot, but I make sure that you include, hiking, get some cardiovascular, some more demand on that. So it's not just like walking around your neighborhood. We all should be walking a lot. We're
Right.
designed, we're bipedal, we're made to walk. So walk more because that's just great for you. But if you want to really increase your cardiovascular, you're going to have to add some other things to that, whether it's some I also do high intensity interval training because it feels so awesome and it reminds you of like, oh my God, I'm not as in good shape as I thought I am, which is really, it's good to be humbled, right? It's good to be reminded like there's always work to be done. And I think the biggest take home message is, as you know, this is a lifestyle, just like we have hygiene and we brush our teeth and we, wash our hair and all that. It is every single day we're going to be at this. It is not like, let's do this in 6 weeks and blah, blah, blah. No, it's every day. And like,
Right.
the goal is to like challenge yourself enough to be humbled and say, okay, there's always more to do, more to improve. And isn't that amazing? Because I'm the only one responsible for taking care of me at the end of the day. So I need to pay attention and movement is the key for health, period.
Absolutely. And think about, you talked about we're bipedal, we have two legs, we're meant to walk. When you look at our ancestors, generations ago, they walked all day long. I mean, they
All day long.
moved, walked all day long. And then you talk about the HIIT training. We make things so complicated, but it's not that, it shouldn't be that complicated. They walked all day long. Every once in a while, they'd sprint. They'd have to sprint to chase
Yeah.
something, catch something, right?
Run
Every
away
once in a
from
while, they'd have to
something.
jump.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, they'd have to lift something really heavy.
Yes.
I mean, and that's what we should be doing. Just like you talk about, adding some weight in your yoga training. It doesn't, and just, like I say, you don't need to go to the gym. Just get one kettlebell. I think if you're going to have one tool in your gym, in a home gym, a kettlebell is the best tool to have.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Probably two of them, a light one, and then a heavier one. But if you just have one in between, that's just fine to start with. Don't make it complicated, because what we did to thrive as humans hundreds and hundreds of years ago was not complicated. They didn't say, well, how heavy is this hammer? And how many times am I going to swing it? And they just swung it. That's all they did.
Exactly. And the less complicated it is in terms of being able to commit to it, the more likely you're going to have, you're going to be able to commit to it. So yeah, find what you love, but make sure that you're doing, and that's the other thing I love about my practice is I knew when I created it as a busy mom and an entrepreneur and all this stuff, like I need to be efficient with this time that I'm dedicating to this particular discipline. So within it, I want to be fully challenged, fully mobilized. We teach inversions, meaning handstands and forearm balances, not headstands. The reason we do that is not to show off. It's because it's a challenge. It's a neurological challenge because my goodness, we don't do that in our daily life, get on our hands very much. But it's also, the inversions are a great way to get your heart rate going up. You're weight bearing through your hands. You're efforting to try this in a very biomechanically sound way. And I really teach people the arc of it. Whether they ever get vertical and are able to hold it is way less important than the effort they're expending in the work to do that. And so, yeah, I wanted to be efficient. And that's what I love too, is like, I feel like it's a very compact, complete, compositive movement that includes cardiovascular, that includes mobility and strength, that includes the necessary movement variability that we are lacking in our daily lives. And yeah, so I'd love for everybody to try it, see what they think.
And you speak of inversion and you think, well, that's not a very functional movement. How often are we going to end up, upside down like that? Possibly not. But here's the thing I would argue. It's kind of like one-legged box jumps. The chance of us having to do a jump on one leg, although we might do it more than when you realize when we're hiking and stuff. But here's my argument. Okay, like you say, it's a challenge. So if you can stand on your hands, then you're going to be able to get up off the floor. Yeah. So as long as you can stand on your hands, you'll never be on your belly, not being able to get off the floor.
Yeah, it's really developing a tremendous amount of shoulder girdle and core strength. That's really what, and it's also when you're doing weight bearing work, or what I would say closed chain work, you are getting like a surge of power through the whole body, like an energetic surge. Versus sometimes when you're lifting weights, it's in one specific area, which people like. They concentrate it into one area. For me, functionality is when you're using multiple muscles around multiple joints, and all of those are working in this coordinated way. And that's why inversions are so incredible. It's like the weight shifting onto your hands and lifting your pelvis over your wrist, stacked on top of your shoulders, requires a lot of core, requires mobility of the shoulders. It's made, and it's fun. It's really fun. I also say, like, we need to have more fun. Like, we're just not having enough fun in life. Life is not very fun in general sometimes. So like, let's have fun on the mat and remind ourselves that we like kind of that inner child. Like we need more play, and we don't need to ask permission. We should just be doing it.
Absolutely. So Laura, as we wind this podcast up, tell us about your website, and if anybody has any questions, how to get a hold of you.
Well, there's the website right there, LYT Yoga. You can see on the right-hand side, we have a start your 7-day trial. You could also check out on the subheading, the online classes. We have a teacher training for a 200 and 500 hour. And our teacher training is, people come out and they're often mistaken as being physical therapists. Like, again, I teach functional anatomy in a really digestible way that people who might have been intimidated by it are, they love it. And the reason being is, if you're teaching anybody, I'm talking a personal trainer, Pilates instructor, any kind of instruction of movement, and you don't understand the body, that is, you're not empowered, right? Because you need to understand the body well. So we have a teacher training, we have online platform. That online platform is really robust. Everything is through a physical therapy lens. So if you've been intimidated by yoga before, or didn't like yoga before, or just want to try something that is not quite yoga and not quite physical therapy, but a beautiful kind of alchemy of both, check it out. Do our 1-week trial. And I promise you're going to feel, so much brighter and lighter and more lit up.
Love it. So one final question. What do you have a passion for, Laura?
I have a passion for energy. Energy to me is like how do I stimulate my brain? How do I stimulate because all of that, the more energy I have, the more I have energy for myself and to give. So that means that I can give to my children, my husband, my animals. I'm a huge animal lover, an animal rescuer, and education. So energy and education together, because that just means that I just am facing each day with a state of curiosity and wonder. And that's, I think, really necessary to enjoy life.
Absolutely. I agree. And you've helped us realize our goal today, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on here.
And if you will hang on for a few minutes after the podcast so we can chat quickly.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune into our regularly scheduled podcast Monday, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.